Hello and welcome once again to the Oklahoma Atheist Godcast, the best goddamn atheist podcast in all of Oklahoma County. This is Chaz. I will be your host tonight. Hopefully that Damien can make it later, but he is at Americans United for Separation of Church and State event. Tonight, I will be hosting Edward Clint. Edward co-produced Skeptic Ink Network, formerly Skeptic Blogs, along with John Loftus to create a platform of discourse on topics in skepticism and secularism featuring some of the most intriguing and thoughtful minds from the intellectual landscape. Edward is committed to open inquiry and public discussion of religion, superstition, pseudoscience, and their effects on society, because they can each bring considerable harm. Edward Clint has been atheist since age 13, and I imagine that his apostasy story is absolutely riveting because Ed grew up in a Mormon household. In fact, Ed, we are requesting our local atheists to send in recordings of them telling their coming out story, and I imagine yours is a pretty nice story.
Yes, thank you. Delighted to be here, Chaz. I will take a note and I will do that. I think it is an interesting story if I do say so.
You hail from Illinois, but now you have returned after 7 years in the Air Force. More recently, you graduated from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Is that how you say it? Urbana-Champaign?
Urbana-Champaign, yes.
Urbana-Champaign, okay. With a BS in psychology, and you've joined the bioanthropology department at UCLA. I'm very jealous about this. Here you will continue to research in evolutionary psychology. While you were in the Air Force, you had several occasions to fight religious proselytization and also served as a secular student leader while at UIUC. You're a former president of the Illini Secular Student Alliance with experience producing ad campaigns, debates, secular activism, and protests. You are a speaker at events and other educational activities, and you are a primary organizer for the Regional Interfaith Conference here at the University of Illinois last spring. That was my best impersonation of Rachel Maddow. Is there anything else that you would like to add to this?
That's a decent summary. I would like to add if you don't mind to that.
Not at all.
I'm especially proud during my presidency at the University of Illinois of the community and the bridge building that I was able to do while I was there. For example, I created a good relationship with the Muslim Student Alliance on campus, which is the first time that ever happened for our student group. I greatly strengthened our connections to other groups on campus, especially what you might think of our natural enemies, the Christians called the Navigators, the Catholics.
Uh-huh.
I greatly strengthened our connection to the national secular groups like Center for Inquiry and the Secular Student Alliance, and I think that all that experience is very apropos to the discussion on the subject matter we have today.
So that's probably why you meshed well with the Harvard Humanist Chaplaincy.
Yes, that they are very much to do with community building, and I've written a bit for them, and they are some of my favorite people.
Yes, well, I follow James Croft. I actually got to meet him at the Wichita Skeptics Convention, and he was gracious. We had an argument on Twitter, and I found him during lunch break, and he came and had lunch with us.
Delightful, isn't he? He's just the most adorable yet academically astute people you'll ever meet.
And incredibly, yeah, he's incredibly nice, but he does not give up on his position.
No. He's definitely rigorous about the positions he adopts.
I think that's an interesting way. You can be, like you said, rigorous and fight for your position and know that it's true or think that's true, and yet you can be gracious and listen to and understand someone else's point of view.
Yes, he takes being thoughtful and understanding of the other's position like almost to an extreme. He's exceptionally natural at it.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about how you got to know John Loftus?
Oh, absolutely. I first met him a few years ago. He actually came to the University of Illinois, and he did a debate with Dinesh D'Souza, and so I was able to, meet him, and we went out for a beer afterwards, and that sort of, clued me into his existence, and I picked up one of his books, and after that we didn't have like a lot of contact until I would say recently, but I knew who he was, I knew about his blogs, and I'd read his very good book, and so forth. So that's how that's how it is. I know, John.
Something I've been curious about. What are the motivations for Skeptic Ink Network?
Well, I think it's I noticed, and I think John did at the same time, that there's a widespread malaise and negativity and fighting in the secular channels that we're a part of, the social networks. Certainly on my Facebook page, I saw people saying, I'm considering leaving the movement just outright. I'm just going to step back from this on the Twitter, and there's a lot of criticism of the atmosphere and the toxicity, and when I see that, it makes me think like, well, okay, this blog that you're talking about is not that good. What's better? Like, what can I recommend in its place? And I couldn't really think of anything that perfectly fit that bill. And so I thought, well, if I can't think of a better example, then why don't we build one? And I think John was very much thinking the same sort of thing at the same time. He was very vocal, and this was about 2 months ago, and he was very vocal about that, and I saw that, and he saw me, and we thought, why not do that? And in addition to producing some good and non-politicized content, we might also create a positive and inclusive community as well.
What you're saying is that some people wanted to leave the movement altogether. Now, I've heard this. Let's not dance around it, if you don't mind. I've heard people on free thought blogs talk about how, they know so many people having to take breaks. Bloggers from free thought blog having to take breaks from the movement because it's so a toxic atmosphere. But are you saying there are people from a different point of view that have also been thinking that this is just too much and they don't enjoy it any longer and they want to leave? They want to leave?
Oh yes, I would definitely say it's. There's people on both sides, and people who don't necessarily even want a side.
Right.
They just want to read a blog about religion or secularism or science, and they can't because they go to read the blog they like, and it's all about who's right and who's wrong and who's a bad person and who isn't. So I think it's across the board.
I can definitely see that as a person who wants to avoid taking sides, because I don't actually think I don't like labels. And I don't actually think taking a side helps you figure out what is true and what is fiction. And I think what it does is it divides us, but it also helps us just listen to what is easy. So I already believe this thing. I don't want to associate with someone else who believes, say, a political persuasion. I don't want to have that perspective that is so counter to what I believe, and so I naturally want to surround myself with people who are like me, and I seem to, some people seem to enjoy that greatly, and that's something that I try to avoid.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think one time Debbie Goddard commented to me that the modern technology that we have is sort of great, like Facebook, and that we pick who we're going to have on our friends list, but that over time it ends up being like all people that sort of think what we think and like what we like, no matter what that is, that whatever perspective we have, and then we end up never hearing from the other side. We don't intend for that to happen, but it's what we do, and I think people would do very well, I think, to just leave people in their sphere, whether that's Facebook or Twitter or whatever, that they distinctly don't think are right. Now, if you think that they're a liar or a bad person for some reason, then that's one thing. But if you just think that they sincerely believe something you didn't, I think we would all do very well just to leave some of those people. I make a point of doing that. I don't remove people on Facebook because they think that I'm wrong about something or I think that they're wrong.
I like that point of view. I don't think that it's I think some people don't realize that. I think you need to realize that and know that you have an inclination to surround yourself with people that make it easier for you to believe what you already believe. And if we can fight that inclination, then we'll be better off. Loftus has criticized free thought blogs for not having a mission statement. Does Skeptic blogs have a mission statement? I'm sorry. Does Skeptic Ink Network, formerly Skeptic blogs, have a mission statement?
Yes, we do, and I think John's criticism is largely a good one. and you can see it on the main page. I'm not going to describe how because I think it's going to change by the time people hear this, but it will be a something prominently linked to on our main page because we think that that's important, that we have a clear mission and that people can read, like, what is this for? What is this about? Is this what I want, or is it not what I want?
What do you think the problem is with not having a mission statement?
Well, I think there's myriad problems. One is that this prospective readers might not know what the network is there for. It may be diffuse. And I think Free Thought Blogs has had that problem. People are saying, like, well, wait a minute, I thought you're Free Thought Blogs. This isn't Free Thought. I think Free Thought is this. And that they've had to have this whole protracted discussion. And I think that's a discussion worth having, but the whole thing could be avoided if you said, hey, here's what we mean by this. And now you're not going to be confused. Number two, I want to be fair to my authors because I expect certain things of them, right? I'm going to expect them to talk about their area of expertise, and I want to delineate the tone and the boundaries. So I can't later say, as was done to certain free thought bloggers I won't name, I can't later say you've crossed the invisible line in the sand that you didn't know was there, but you should have known it was there. You know, I think the most fair way to treat people is to say, here's the boundaries. Here's what I expect of you, and if you don't like them, that's fine. You don't have to, write here. You don't have to comment here. It applies to the commenters and the bloggers equally. So I think it's extremely fair. I think it's necessary to give your network definition what it's for, and it sets the tone and the boundaries for the whole thing.
Well, I can certainly see how, like you're starting a new job and you want to know as a new employee exactly what your employer is asking of you. And I think having it written down and, not just spoken or implied would be helpful.
I agree, and it's something that evolves over time too. We have a mission statement, and we'll probably, revise it regularly as we get better at doing this thing.
Well, I hope so. This sounds like you're doing a good job of thinking of what might happen in the past. But I'm thinking you've been taking note of what's happening now and are trying to figure out how you can avoid those pitfalls.
Certainly, there's some examples out there of what not to do, and I think it's wise to take note and what to do. What has worked very well. Both things are worth noting.
Okay, excellent. What are you looking for in new bloggers?
I would say there's three basic things that we're looking for. One, they have to be able to write. I know that sounds obvious, but it's really not. Writing is an art unto itself, and
for sure, yeah, it's very difficult. Yeah.
It's something you have to practice often to do well. Most people aren't just born doing it, and you could have the most fascinating experience in life, and if you can't put two words together, then it really doesn't do us any good. So there's that. The second I would say is diversity is important to us in every sense other than those that are occluded by the mission statement. Okay. So I like people who come from different perspectives than I have, or maybe that typically blog. We have a blogger, I don't know if you know this, who's an Iranian expat and an ex-Muslim.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, he blogs under the blog No Cross, No Crescent.
Okay.
The name hosts, and I can't, I've been an atheist a long time, but I can't begin to understand what that must have been like, what he's experienced, what he's gone through, and so what that person has to say is so valuable and so interesting, and that's something that we value, and like I said, along just about every dimension, politically. If somebody was a Republican, I would say, okay, you might be a good blogger if you fit the other requirements for our blog. They don't have to be an atheist to blog on our network. That's not a requirement. Some of our mission is explicitly, secularist, and you kind of have to be an atheist for some of those slots.
Right.
But not everything. So that's an important thing. The third thing is the biggest in my mind, and that's what I would call relevant expertise. And I think many blog networks recruit people who are essentially amateur or maybe mid-level pundits, and they don't necessarily have a particular resume or credentials beyond that. Our philosophy is that a blog is like a channel for expounding on some pool of expertise. It is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself, In other words, we don't want bloggers per se. I want someone who is awesome at something relevant to our mission and is willing to write about that for our readers. So that's a perspective and also expertise. And expertise could be many things. It might be a graduate degree in something. We have a few of those in the group. We have a lot of professionals. It might be extensive experience in on the street activism. It might be coming from Iran. But something that you can draw on that is that could be labeled a specialty or an expertise, and not just I'm a guy in society and I have an opinion and I'm going to comment.
So not necessarily what I would consider to be a popularist.
Yeah, at least I don't think that's I don't think it would be terrible to have that on our blog by any means. It's fine, but I would like for the majority of our bloggers not to fit that particular bill.
That makes sense, and you don't want that. It's kind of a big personality, and I'm not sure you want too many of those on one network.
I don't want to exclude anybody unfairly, because there are people out there that are just fascinating people and are able to articulate their experience beautifully and wonderfully, and they may not have like a degree or whatever, but they could still be wonderful at what they do. So if I happen upon that kind of person, it's pretty rare, but I would pick them up if they have a very interesting perspective and a great way to talk about it. I would not say no.
Yeah, in fact, Michael Shermer, in the beginning of his latest book, The Believing Brain, he tells a story of one of his best friends who's not professionally trained at all. He's an autodidact, but he has incredible insights, and he's a very helpful friend to have. So
sure,
I can see how you're not just a bunch of what's the criticism? Old white educated people.
Yes. Well, we certainly hope not to be.
Yeah. You've kind of answered my next question. But maybe we can go a little further. My next question is, will bloggers be asked to write on topics of which they have been formally trained, or is it going to be a freestyle environment?
Yeah. We generally are going to have an expectation when we bring a writer on that they have a topic and that they're going to focus on that. But beyond that, there's not going to be any hand-holding, and there's not going to be any upset if they post on things that are outside of that. We expect our bloggers are adults, and that they're also curating a community, right? This isn't just about I have this information and I will impart it on you and you will listen.
Yeah.
It's also we want people to interact. We want people to comment. We want people to enjoy the community that the network hopefully can provide. And that means that sometimes people will write about a little bit more freeform, a little bit more loose, and that's perfectly fine with us. We just want the meat, if you will, to be their topic, and then they can garnish that however they want. They will have quite a bit of latitude there.
I think that makes sense. One of the free thought bloggers now at Patheos, the blogger that I appreciated most is Dan Fink, and he is heavily interested in ethics, but is also able to blog on whatever is interesting to him or whatever is funny, and I think that makes it for a blog. It's not just an academic paper, but it's informative as well as having some levity, and I think that's the perfect blog for me.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think there's a good mix in there. There's a good balance of content and then just sort of humor or observations or just having a good time or getting to know somebody.
I have a question based on a part of an answer you gave earlier. It's based on the politics. How do you think you can avoid the strains that happen amongst groups whenever politics are involved? I'm positive that your bloggers are going to want to comment on politics and even define themselves as following a certain political brand. How do you think you can avoid the tension that could be created by this?
Do you mean politics in the sense of like Democrats and Republicans politics, or
like ultra liberal versus libertarian, or that type of issues that we've seen in the community lately?
I don't think I foresee that being an issue. Maybe I'm just thinking of the blogs that we have right now, and we're sort of philosophy heavy, and those kinds of things don't pop up on like Hume's Apprentice.
Oh, okay, right.
In a discussion of free will, nobody says like, "Hey, I'm libertarian, so screw you guys."
Yeah.
Hasn't come up yet. There's other kinds of politics, of course, that can play a role, like the kind that's dividing the community right now along various axes that relate to things like feminism and atheism plus. If that's what you mean, then I might have a different answer.
If you were to have an opportunity to hire like an atheism person who defines himself as atheism plus, would you have an issue inviting them to your network?
I expect they might have an issue.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's a different question. Well, it's not impossible. I said before we kind of value diversity.
Yeah.
And I will hold to that. I think that there are a lot of people that are persuaded by the optimism of Atheism Plus, and I really can't fault somebody for being optimistic, even if I may not share it. I may find it somewhat naive. But I think there's a lot of shrill and angry people that are out there right now that are on both sides and they're screaming. But I think there's regular people too that aren't doing the screaming and they like Atheism Plus. And if such a person otherwise was qualified, to be a blogger, if they fit the description that I gave and they saw my mission statement and said, okay, I'm fine with that, then I definitely wouldn't disqualify them, on that basis. So we might take somebody who's Atheism Plus.
I understand that, and I can. I would hope that if people want to have a label like that, that in fact it doesn't divide us so greatly that we can't, interact with one another. If Atheism Plus spreads, eventually, I hope it can become less friction in the movement. So hopefully.
Sure, I think. Before, you're kind of asking how do we, avoid maybe the toxicity that is present in some parts of the blogosphere, the atheosphere, and I think that's a really good question. And for us, I think there's three things that we can do, and nothing's really a guarantee. We don't control what people do, certainly,
right.
But I think it starts with recruiting people as writers whose main ambition is to communicate what they're excited about to the public. And this sounds boring and maybe trite, but the truth is those people are actually relatively rare and wonderful, and they make all the difference. And the circle of people for whom that actually describes is much smaller than the people who claim that describes them.
Yeah.
So that's very important to us. And I think many bloggers appear to have the implicit central goal of self-promotion and growing their fan club, even to the exclusion of some other virtues that they would claim to have. So our task, John and mine, in building the network is recruiting people who just really care about what they do and they just are excited about talking about it. And I think so far we've done very well at that. If you check out some of our blogs, there's some very enthusiastic people and some very good ones. Number two, I think there needs to be a clear and clearly articulated mission, as we discussed a moment ago, so that the authors know what's expected of them and what the boundaries for tone are. And this can't just be a written statement, right? This also requires strong leadership to enforce it where necessary. People will, on occasion tread the line or they will trespass, and they have to be kept in check when that happens.
Yeah.
This applies to both commenters and authors. I don't really foresee that, but it could happen, and that's how you keep things from going out of control. Is when somebody steps over the line, they probably don't mean to, and you say, hey, remember we have this mission statement and we should keep it in mind, and like this post is about a person instead of an idea, and maybe that's not what we want. So we need to have those conversations as the leaders, and I think we're going to be. I think that's not going to be a problem. So third, inclusivity, as I mentioned, is an explicit virtue. And this means to us no purity tests and nobody getting kicked out of the clubhouse without breaking the explicit rules. Again, it makes sense to have rules because we can be fair to people and we can say, hey, we're being as inclusive as we can with respect to the goals that we're trying to accomplish. And this doesn't mean no criticism. It means civil and thoughtful criticism where it's necessary. And I want to make that clear. We're not we're not saying this is a quote-unquote safe space where nobody can criticize anybody. We're all for criticism. We just think that it should be civil, and it should have a basis, and it should have a rationale, and it shouldn't just be, I don't like you, or you're buddies with this guy, and I think that guy is a misogynist, so you must be one too, and get out of here. So that's what inclusivity means to us. And I think those three things can go very far to keeping the tone a positive, a healthy one that people will enjoy.
Well, I'm very hopeful for that, because I really despise the whole guilt by association that I see often. You know, if you retweet somebody or you just talk to someone that disagrees with a free thought blogger or a skeptic or whatever, I do see that often where they don't listen to your arguments, but instead find ways to discount you. So you make an argument and they say, well, you did this and that, so I don't care what you just said, and please GTFO. You know, get the fuck out of here. I don't care about this. Can you please tell me that story about Chris Stedman and Abby Smith one more time?
Yes, I guess I don't mind talking about it because all of this appeared on blogs, so
okay.
It doesn't really matter. It had been a relatively private conversation, but Abby was talking about something, and I kind of agreed with one of the points she was making, and the following day my remark was screen grabbed from Facebook and put on one of the blogs to, I guess, shame me, which didn't shame me at all, but and I don't agree with Abby on everything, and that wasn't the point of it, but it was just my association with Abby had infected me, and I was then infected with the misogyny virus, I guess.
Indeed.
And a day or two after that, Chris Stedman commented on my wall, not in that thread or anything, he just posted on my wall, and he threw a very generic comment my way that was positive, like, hey Ed, like what you've been doing lately, something like that. It literally had no content. It referred to nothing. And then his comment was put in a blog the next day, and he had like been in the woods for a week or something, and he had no idea what was going on with me or Abby, and he was twice removed and infected by the contagion somehow, even not knowing what the content of any of this actually was. So I think when this happens, something has gone very wrong.
I think you're right. I think we should try and focus on a particular person's argument and not do things like that story, which is just a way of discounting someone without having to address what they're saying.
Yes, and literally not addressing what they're saying. Not in a figurative, you're not hearing me, but in a, hey, I didn't actually say anything about the topic that you're talking about. I just know the person that you're talking about, so yeah. Quite so.
One problem I've been noticing, well, it's a problem for me, but something I've been noticing about blogs is that many of them have definitive conclusions about certain topics, scientific topics, or philosophical topics, but they don't, in my mind, create strong foundations for their opinions. And I often don't even see any citations for their work, for what they're referencing or how they got to this position and conclusion. Is this something that you are concerned with at Skeptic Ink?
Are you thinking of as a clarification, academic citations or something more general than that?
No, it's been mostly academic citations. I would like to see when people are making economic statements or sometimes even scientific statements, but I hardly ever see any references where I could actually go back to the source and figure out if I come to the same conclusion as they did.
Yes, I think that's a really good question. And when I write about evolutionary psychology, which is my academic discipline, and I kind of have references at my fingertips, I often wonder, like, do people want to see this? Like, well, or is it just, ivory tower, types like me that care about that and will actually follow it? I can say that I like to see it. I don't like to do it because I'm lazy, but I like to see it. And there's actually some people on Skeptic Ink Network that regularly have citations for the things. It's really cool. I think Nodung is one of the people that does that. I think it's really cool. I think it's something people can do. I can tell you, up to now, I've definitely counseled my bloggers a time or two that they should not just say such and such a thing happened. You should link to it so that people know explicitly what you're talking about in case they don't know or in case they disagree. They should have the option of disagreeing with you
Right.
based on a fact, not based on an allusion to something that happened. So I very much agree with you. How that I'm going to approach that as the co-producer of the blog network is another matter. I don't think I can mandate it. I think what I will do going forward, and I thank you for bringing this up because now it's making me think about it. And
Thanks.
an important part of having a blog with a good tone, like a good, rigorous, evidence-supported, non-opinionated on everything sort of tone, is citations of what's being referred to. So I think I will definitely strongly suggest to my bloggers that they reference the things that aren't content in their post and are also not opinions that they're making. To strengthen their writing, to make it clear to the reader, and to be fair to the subject matter. I think that might be as much as I can do, and still have. This is not an academic journal, and I can't impose draconian strictures on my authors, but I can certainly try to foster an atmosphere where that's considered a norm instead of something that's unusual.
Well, I would like that because, many times what they're writing about, I think, because a blog is kind of like an opportunity to be introduced to a subject. And so whenever I read a blog, I'll sometimes think, well, I kind of want to know how they got to this point or what else I could read that would help me have a better understanding of the topic like this blogger does. And often it's just not there. I don't know how to follow. I have to go elsewhere to figure out exactly how they got to this position. So I think it'd be very, very helpful. And I don't think it's just an ivory tower or an ivory tower luxury. I really don't.
Well, I appreciate that perspective. I'll certainly consider that, and I think you're right. I certainly, as a reader of many blogs, I'm sometimes frustrated when a writer will make many allusions to things in a maybe not entirely fair or complete way. So they'll cast a little bit of a spin on events that have happened, and maybe a series of like 5 or 8 events without linking to them and without explaining. And it sort of paints a very spin doctory sort of picture of the point that they want to make, and their point might be a really good one.
Yeah.
If you don't know what all those things are, and maybe you do, but if you don't, then that person could be just bullshitting you completely, or they might be totally right. You just have no way of knowing.
You really don't, and it leads to assumptions from the reader because even if I am a skeptic, I know that I still give the writer authority, even if I don't exactly, even if I don't even agree with them. Just because they're writing, I still give them authority.
Yeah, you sort of have to give them the benefit of the doubt just to get through the post that you're reading or something.
That makes sense, yeah.
You have to let the narrative weave itself in your mind, or else you can't coherently digest the thing that's in front of you. It's a little bit of psychology for you. That's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Whom do you see as your intended audience?
I think, broadly speaking, our intended audience is people that are interested in our core subject matter, which I would say is application of skepticism, both the broad and the narrow sense of skepticism. We don't have skeptical bloggers in the sense of Michael Shermer and JREF and DJ Grothy yet, but we plan to have that soon.
Right.
So there's that. Science advocacy, secular discourse on religion, secularism in general. Those are some of the areas. We also hope to appeal to the secular and skeptical communities, and especially activists who maybe feel that the atmosphere at their current or previous online communities has become too toxic or too politicized. I think I mentioned that earlier, but we definitely want to appeal to them. We want to create a positive and an inclusive environment, a place where they can come and read content and not politics most days than not.
Yeah, I think activists have something, information that people not everyone has a view on. So I do think that they have a position in blogging. Given this audience that you're looking for, whom do you see as your competition?
It's hard to imagine. No, 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 I don't mean that. I think our competition is people who the terrific bloggers that I can't really think of a network. There's some terrific bloggers out there who cover similar topics.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would say people like Jerry Coyne, JREF Swift blog. I don't know if you're familiar. The James Randi Education Foundation has a blog called Swift, and they talk about skepticism. Russell Blackford's blog, Hemet Mehta's. These are all really good bloggers, and they cover a lot of our bread and butter, and they do it very well. They're our competition. I say that in a friendly way because I love those guys, and I'm glad they're out there. They're all doing what they do, and I'll try and persuade them to join me, perhaps. But that's as mean as I'll ever get.
Well, excellent. Hemet Mehta came to Oklahoma and came to our Free OK convention.
Oh, that's yes. I believe I read about that. Hemet's just great. He's one of my favorite, personalities in secularism. One of my favorite blogs. One of the most even and reasonable and level-headed people that I've come across. And he's doing the Lord's work, if you don't mind there.
You may have already answered this, but we can still touch on this. How will you create a different tone for Skeptic Ink as to what is espoused at Free Thought Blogs? Examples, these are words that are generally used for people who are just dissenters at Free Thought Blogs, dissenting commenters, I mean. They sometimes call these dissenters chew toys. So we're going to send this guy out and you guys can beat up on him, and then we'll ban him whenever he's gone. They'll sometimes say they make use of the word porcupines in ways that I don't like to think about, and they label some women who oppose or don't completely agree with their feminist view chill girls. How do you think you can create different tones so you don't have the same type of atmosphere?
Yeah, I think I did answer this a lot earlier, and I mentioned 3 things that are important to that: recruiting the right people, having a clear and well-articulated mission statement that will basically include some of those things. Inclusivity is an explicit virtue. Like, that's not something that people with those kinds of blogs will ever really have. They might claim to, but they certainly don't. I would add one thing though at this point, and that's that. There are two, broadly speaking, there are 2 kinds of feminism that are out there, and people think that in the secular movement, the people that call themselves feminists are largely like de facto feminists. They're sort of the official feminism, but really they just represent one kind of feminism, which is called protectionist feminism. And it's kind of the kind of feminism that says that women are, de facto second class and oppressed in all the key ways sociopolitically, and just, I don't know, I guess always will, and they need to be sort of protected from the savages of society. But there's another house of skepticism, if you will, called egalitarianism or egalitarian feminism, which is more centrally focused on, we just need to have equal pay and equal rights, and not have discrimination against women that's unlawful and immoral, and these kinds of things. And those are broad strokes, of course. Both schools have their egalitarian and protectionist sort of leanings. But in our movement, we really just have the one kind, or at least the people that I think are very loud are protectionists, and they're opposed by feminists who are essentially egalitarian. So I think I do want to have a feminist on an explicit feminist on Skeptic Ink Network at some point. I haven't started that recruitment yet, but I want somebody who actually writes about that from a skeptical perspective. And I think that I would pick somebody who identifies closer to the egalitarian side than the protectionist side, or at least not what I would describe as a little bit radical protectionism that we see today, which is, in my opinion, the source of some of these epitaphs like "chill girl" and "chew toys" and things like that. I think it comes out of that.
What do you think that protectionist feminists and and egalitarian feminists, do you think they have anything to learn from one another?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
I think it probably can't fail to be true, but you have to, quickly identify which person you're talking about and which doctrine. There's reams and books on both kinds, and they have subtypes. There are subkinds of both, and it's very hard to say.
Okay.
I would broadly say yes, but that's a very vague statement, and I can't get any more specific than that.
Well, yeah, you're right. You're right. Exactly. It's a very in-depth conversation that probably can't be summed up so quickly. But in general, when we go back to labels, when you say you're an egalitarian feminist, you may be nearly always right, but there is something you can still see from the other side's perspective and understand it, and you might be able to incorporate it in your own views. That's just my opinion on life. That's not a very novel idea, but that is how I feel.
Yeah, I think you're right, and there are some very good, very sane speakers on both sides of that. I don't claim that the egalitarians have won or something.
Yeah,
I
right.
just
Okay.
think that it's a whole. It's like a blind spot. It's a viewpoint that is not represented, and I don't see that it's anywhere. It's less legitimate than the protectionists that are now taken as de facto, experts, or the de facto feminists in the secular movement. I don't think that's a fair case, and it shouldn't be regarded that way.
Yeah, I do think it's unfair from the outspoken feminists today to act like the people not in their school of feminism, people outside of their school of feminism, are not feminists.
Yes, there's a lot of room for debate, and even it's not meant to be absolute. Like, there are egalitarian feminists, and they don't necessarily say that all the points that a protectionist might make are wrong, or when it comes to a specific policy, like a law, like for example, there should be women's shelter. Well, that's not very egalitarian, right? Because there aren't men's shelter.
Yeah.
But a protectionist might come back and say, well, look, women need this more than men.
Yeah.
And I think it's not a betrayal of an egalitarian value to recognize the reasonableness of that, the rationality of like, oh, there's a need that one side has that the other doesn't have, and that need should be met. It's very real, and there's real moral suffering that's coming from not having that. So that's not it's not a bad thing or a betrayal. It's just a matter of focus. Like, what's the central source of the inequality that women suffer, or any harm done to women as a result of their gender? Like, what's the ultimate source of that? And that's where those two schools differ. One will say one thing, and one will say the other.
I appreciate that view. How big of a network do you expect Skeptic Ink will become? Like, how many bloggers do you think you're going to...
About 4,000, maybe?
Yeah?
No,
okay,
no.
Excellent. Everybody.
This is also a really good question, because these things are all so new that nobody really knows. I mean, there isn't exactly a history that you can guide yourself with when it comes to blog networks.
Right.
I'm leaning towards shooting for a 25, give or take. We might have 20 or we might have 30, and anywhere in there I think is fine. I think more than that starts to dilute the network a little bit in terms of having overlap on topics. And some of that is perfectly fine, but we don't want to get too much of it. We don't want to have too much redundancy in the network. It also depends on who the specific people are. They might be very unique perspectives who cover the same, philosophy or secularism, and that might be okay. But my guideline right now is like, we'll shoot for about 25 and see how that goes, and probably totally change my mind 2 months from now.
Okay. Some of the declared A-plussers say that a large reason why A+ is needed is to protect the prominent women in the skeptical and atheist movement from misogynist comments and abusive language in general. Maybe I've missed it, but I haven't learned exactly how identifying oneself as an A+ is going to shield them from the vile people who interact with them. Have you considered if or how the women in our movement can be protected from these people?
Wow, that's a loaded question, Chaz.
Okay. Well, and maybe it's unfair, and you can tell me so.
No.
Maybe it's not,
No.
cogent.
It's not unfair. It's a good question.
Okay.
Well, I agree with you. I think that adopting a label doesn't protect you. I guess if you have a forum, like I understand that they have some sort of a website with a forum, and you kick everybody out, but whoever has a gold pass with
Yeah.
you know, female symbol on it. I don't know. I guess that makes a safe space and you can have a talk. But I also think a space generally in life gets safer to the degree that it's cut off from the rest of the world. The safest space that you can be in, Chaz, is locked in your closet, no pillows and with your ears plugged, and now nobody can ever hurt you. But you're also not interacting with the world. You're not taking any risks. You're not talking to other people.
Yeah.
You're not participating in dialogue. All those things are risky, and risk is good oftentimes, not all the time, but it's often good. So I think a safe space is something that's necessary in some times in some places, but it's not a virtue in a vacuum. It's not something that we should shoot for. We should shoot to achieve. We should shoot to improve the discourse and understanding that people have. Those are risky things that involve a certain amount of exposure to people who might do you harm. So I don't know what adopting the label will really do. If you want to exclude yourself from a lot of people, that will make you safer. But I would also like to say that paradoxically, a lot of these people actually become magnets for abuse because they're so responsive to it. I think all of us learned it when we were 6-year-old, especially if we had a brother or a sister.
Yeah.
Your brother or sister really responded to your taunting. What did you do? You taunted them mercilessly.
Mm-hmm.
And if they ignored you, if they were stalwart and just kind of shrugged you off, they would just go away and find something else to do. And that sounds a little bit glib, but I think it's true. I think the people with websites where every other day they post nasty comments on it, I'm not opposed to shaming people, by the way, who have acted terribly, but shaming doesn't work when it's a random person on the internet because they're anonymous.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's not really shaming anybody. So instead what you're doing is saying, you upset me, you hurt me, you did exactly what you wanted to do, and I'm going to make it the focus of my blog. I will give you bragging rights that you can point out to your weird, emotionally stunted, misogynist friends, and they'll high-five you, buy you another Everclear. So they actually, I know that I'll get called victim blaming for this, and I don't care. I think when you are so incredibly responsive, you give it so much focus. It deserves some focus, but when you give it so much priority and you put the spotlight on them, you are saying to the entire internet, everybody who hates what I'm doing, please come and harass me, because I will put your name in lights and I will make sure I respond to you, and you will get exactly what you want out of it.
Well, I think you're right, and not because I want to blame the victim, but because I actually do want them to be protected. I don't want anyone to be called these names or be, viciously attacked just because you dared to write something and create something and do something for yourself and not just, read everybody else, what everybody else does. But you're right, they're anonymous. It's not shaming them. There's got to be something else we can do. And it's not as if the rest of the community doesn't want the same thing, because Amy Roth Davis had no problem at all getting many leaders in the community to, declare they are against the people who show such utter hatred for the women in our movement. And so I just kind of wish that they say that all these comments are the reason why we need A+. And I don't think that's quite right. I think it's all these comments show that we need to do something else, because it's not stopping.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. There's no excuse for how these people are treated. And in fact, as somebody who does research in psychology, I think there's something really there worth studying. There is this layer of misogyny that's embedded in the culture, and I think it bears study, especially as it pertains to the internet and the anonymity and all those sorts of things that make it easy. But what they do is not that. It's not in any sense studying it. It's not trying to understand where it's coming from. You really need, I'm not blaming them for that either, because you need an academic to be involved to try and figure out, like, well, okay, how can we study this? How can we try and figure out why this is happening, and come up with an academic or an intellectual, scientific understanding of the process here. But what they're doing is not changing anything. And I'm willing to consider any hypothesis, any proposal that will actually cause that to decline and diminish. And I think all of us getting very angry about it doesn't by that self accomplish it.
Well, I think we've genuinely gotten ourselves in trouble during this talk.
Yes.
But I think the listeners will be able to know exactly what they're getting into with Skeptic Ink. And I'm excited. I like to hear more perspectives, and I can't wait to see what more bloggers you bring in and just the kind of atmosphere that you're going to foster. So I'm really excited. I'm exceptionally happy that you were willing and to come on to our little podcast.
Well, I'm very happy to do it, and I will tell you there's some very interesting bloggers on our horizon, and I hope you like them.
Okay, excellent. Edward Clint, the co-producer with John Loftus of Skeptic Ink Network. Thank you and have a good night.
Thanks, Chaz.
The Oklahoma Atheists Godcast is produced by the Oklahoma Atheists. The mission of the Oklahoma Atheists is to develop a community of individuals and families who value and promote critical thinking, free thought, reason, and a scientific worldview, and who seek to have a positive effect on the community at large through fellowship, rational discussion, community service, and education. For more information, please visit our website at www.oklahomaatheist.com. The music for today's show is from the song God is Dead by Jaron Lake and is reproduced here under a Creative Commons license. Jared's music and the Oklahoma Atheist Godcast are hosted courtesy of the Internet Archive's Community Audio Collection, available at www.archive.org.